Afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Columbia Corridor Association Joint Contracting Authority meeting for March 21st, 2023. And Winnie, do you want to do a roll call?
Yes. Sorry, I'm just trying to let people in at the same time. So Reed Wagner.
Here.
Kenny Stephenson.
Here.
Corky Collier.
Here.
Karen Myers. Not here yet. And Claudio Camposano. Also not here yet. You have 3 members present.
All right. And just a reminder that this meeting is being recorded and we will go right into the budget discussion with Lori Baker.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. All right, can you all see that?
Yes.
Great.
And Claudio is arriving now as well.
All right, I'll get started. So good afternoon. Today we're reviewing the proposed budget for fiscal year 2023-2024. The budget was approved by the LRC IGA board on March 1st. Today, we're going to review the proposed budget, including revenues, partner contributions, and expenditures. You've received a copy of the proposed budget in your board packet. In November, we came to you with an adjustment for the fiscal year 22-23 budget. We implemented those corrections, including a reduction to the LRC IGA revenue schedule for the 22-23 fiscal year in order to ensure transparency in our financial information and to assure that our partners were only paying for costs incurred for the year. We also noted at that time we would be requesting a return to regular revenue schedules when we proposed the budget for fiscal year 2023-24. Under the terms of the agreement, each year a 5% increase can be made to the revenues from the partners without an additional funding request. In order to fully fund the expenditures for the JCA in 2023-24, we're proposing a 5% increase to the reduced revenue amount approved in November and an additional revenue amount that aligns to the dollars originally included in the 5-year funding agreement with our partners. You will see 3 columns of data in the proposed budget, 2 to reflect the 2 revenue requests and a final column that totals the resources and requirements for the fiscal year. This schedule shows the total partner contributions for fiscal year 2021-22, 2022-23, and 2023-24. As you can see, the 23-24 proposed revenue aligns with the original scheduled revenues for the JCA. This slide details the proposed resources for 2023-24. The estimated balance carry forward is $130,000. This is slightly lower than our forecast due to $20,000 in additional materials and services spending that's now anticipated. Contract revenue aligns with the numbers we discussed on the previous slide. And interest is the amount of interest earnings we anticipate on the local government investment pool for the JCA. On the expenditure side, given that this is the final year for the JCA, we're anticipating spending all of the remaining funds. Professional services include audit services, legal services, general consulting, and community relations. The decrease of $46,000 in 23-24 is due to a $10,000 decrease in community relations and a $35,000 reduction in project facilitation, which was budgeted at $35,000 in the current year. The first 4 line items in the capital outlay reflect continued support from the MCDD staff to ensure that projects are moving forward. This funding supports 3 positions at 0.8 FTE for a total of 2.4 FTE, which is consistent with prior years. The $166,000 in certification projects is the local share for non-PMLS design work. And with that, this is our first review of the budget for the upcoming fiscal year, and we will be returning to meet with you in June, and we'll request at that point that you adopt the budget.
Questions from board members?
Tanny, I don't know if you can get a little closer to your mic. Some people were having trouble hearing you.
Okay, questions for board members? Is that better?
Tanny, this is Reed. Just want to thank Lori for laying that out. Very helpful.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? All right.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Lori, we discussed briefly in another meeting about cost allocation and cost assignment for staffing. Has that been changed at all, or do we still have an issue there where we're having staffing costs that are kind of just being absorbed by the drainage districts?
Are you talking about the urban district
Yeah.
proposed budget? That has not been changed at this point. So we just reviewed the proposed budget with the urban district last week. And we have not made any changes to what was proposed, which means that because of the reduced amount of funding that we have available in the urban district for 23-24, there is some subsidy happening with the staffing costs that are held at the MCDD entity.
And do we have a similar situation with this budget?
I think Colin could speak better to that question with regard to the planned activities that fall under the LRC IGA. But I think the real issue is the issue of funding the staff time associated with the urban district.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for that question, Corky. There aren't the same issues for this, the Levy Ready Columbia program in the JCA budget, those 2.4 FTE. There is 20%, 0.2 FTE of each one of those positions is funded fully by MCDD. And of course, MCDD is about a 25% contributor to the total JCA budget as part of that partnership agreement. I forget what the exact number is, but as far as the work that's laid out, it is all focused on staffing. Mark Wilcox as the project manager for the PMLS projects, and also funding work on the non-PMLS certification projects. There's funding for staff time for communications efforts. There's also staff time for eligible projects that are listed in the LRC IGA. So that has been used not this current fiscal year, but the previous fiscal year to help fund some of the application for the FEMA Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities grant for the PIR pump station. And then we currently have staff, myself and previously Evan Mitchell, our staff time working for establishing the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District was recognized as part of the LRC IGA, and so we bill our time there. So there isn't that issue, but we are fully, as far as staffing for all of the work that is listed in that budget, it's all covered.
Thanks, Colin.
Okay.
And it's actually 22.5% is the amount of the funding that MCDD provides on the JCA budget.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, hearing none. Is that it for us?
I think Reed was gonna say something.
Okay, Mr. Wagner.
Thank you very much. I have had the pleasure, and I'm sorry I'm off video. I was freezing and off and on, so I turned off my video so I could make sure to connect with the board on this. I've had the immense pleasure of working with MCDD and then most recently the last 4 years with JCA. And it's one of by far my proudest organizational connection. And but I recognize that there are great minds that should fill in and take us to the next step. And so with that, I'm just announcing that I'm going to be stepping down from the JCA board. And because fortunately, Amy Chomowitz from the City of Portland Department of BES is willing to step in and bring her expertise and talents to the JCA. So I think the process is that June will be my last meeting, and Amy would be confirmed at that meeting. And Amy, would you mind introducing yourself to the team?
Sure, I would be happy to. Hang on, I'm just trying to find my video here. Give me just a moment. Okay, for some reason, video is not working at the moment. My apologies. I'll be sure to have that fixed for the June meeting. So I am Amy Chomowitz. I have been with the Bureau of Environmental Services for many years, 28 years. And I've held a number of different roles here. I've spent a considerable amount of time working on the Columbia Slough in particular. I was the slough manager, actually was hired originally to manage a $10 million grant that we got from EPA to restore the slough watershed. I currently am working in our project management office, and sort of my role is sort of fostering decision making with regard to especially large capital projects. And so I have a lot of experience here with the city with contracting, all different kinds of contracting, RFPs, things like that, and certainly budgeting as well. So I know Reed's shoes are really difficult to fill, but I'm looking forward to serving on the JCA. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. And you're correct, Mr. Wagner. I believe we would take this up at the June meeting and do a little swap out, right? That'd be the next procedure.
And I would defer to Wendy to make sure I was correct before I can agree to that.
Well, we'll keep you as long as you will have us read, but yeah, well, I'll put that consideration on the June agenda.
Reed, we are looking for a business representative on the urban board, so just saying.
I think my audio is a little fuzzy right now.
How
Okay,
convenient.
any other business before the JCA board? Hearing none. Okay, and with that, then we will adjourn. Okay, thank you, Reed. Thank you, everyone. And go ahead and turn this over to Tom Hansel.
Thanks, Tammy. So welcome everybody to our March format meeting. I just want to recognize Mary Helen is facing some health issues right now, and I know we all want to keep her in our thoughts. Her energy in this group has been appreciated, especially from me, but I just became aware of it last week listening to the urban meeting. Corky, I know you're chatting with the family. If you feel it's appropriate, you can share an update, perhaps.
She's doing well. I think they're going to kick her out of OHSU and maybe go to another place for a week of therapy, but she broke her femur close to the hip. So not a small little thing. But she's doing surprisingly well. I talked to her yesterday. She seemed quite chipper.
And I actually know she was going to try and sign in today from OHSU if she could do it. So That's
That does
amazing.
not surprise me.
Totally amazing.
Yeah, that's just a testament of her commitment to this organization. So with that, I just want to welcome everybody to today's meeting. And I think we need to do a board roll call. So perhaps, James, you could kick us off with Pen 1.
Great. Thank you for that introduction, Tom. Really appreciate it. Calling Pen 1 board to order. Claudio Campuzano.
Present.
Thank you, Claudio. PGA Christopher.
Present.
And I don't see Annalisa Kohler yet. Jeff Noodleman will join us at 2. James Allison is present. That gives us a quorum.
Val, how are you looking for quorum?
This is Val Humble calling Peninsula 2 Drainage District to order. Val Humble present. I see Eric Molander. Would you like to speak? I see you waving, but you're muted.
Mute, yes. I am present.
I saw Kathy Kellen's name earlier. Is Kathy here? Also
Hi,
muted.
Kathy Kellen's present.
Is Karen Meyer here? There was a phone number listed in the participants. Karen Meyer not present. And Mary Helen hasn't checked in, right? 3 members here, board. We have a quorum for Pen 2. Thank you.
And Ken, I think MCD can call to order.
All right, calling MCD to order. Ken Anderton's present. Just going to go and do a roll call. Corky.
Here.
And Kenzie.
Present.
And Darian.
Present.
And then I
Nikki
believe.
indicated she's not available.
Okay, gotcha. That was going to be my question. Thank you. MCD is called to order.
Thanks, Ken. SDIC, Tammy Stephenson.
Present.
And Stephen Winkle.
Present.
And Tom Hansel is present. SDIC is called to order.
And
Just a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. My error not identifying that at the start. I think we have a pretty full agenda today. Lori, you're right off the start, and I know you're introducing our guest, Jeff Sinclair with Brown & Brown. Take her away.
Indeed. So I am very pleased today to introduce all of you to Jeff Sinclair with Brown & Brown. He is our agent and provides us with a lot of support and advice around risk-related issues. And he will be begin attending our meetings on an annual basis to review with you the insurance coverage levels for all of the districts. Want to make sure that we're being very transparent about the decisions that we're making around risk-related topics. And Jeff can give you an overview of the information that was included in your packet, as well as answering any questions you may have related to our insurance coverage. So with that, I will hand it over to Jeff.
Thank you very much, Laura. Can everybody hear me okay? Am I coming across fine? Great. Thank you very much. My name is Jeff Sinclair. I'm an insurance agent with Brown & Brown. I actually grew up in East County. My aunts and uncles live on Fairview Lake, and we used to call it Mud Lake back when I was growing up. So what can I say? I'm here talking about a general overview about your insurance coverage. And you all have different levels, but you're all with the same carrier or pool, I'll call it. You're with Special Districts Association of Oregon, or the Special Districts Insurance Services Trust. That's a mouthful. It's a pool. It's actually not an insurance company. They are not governed by the insurance commissioner. They're a pool that is licensed and in good standing with the state of Oregon. About 980 special districts are with Special Districts Association of Oregon. So they have almost all of the special districts in the entire state. It's been around since 1978. The pool itself has been around providing insurance since 1985. It's like I say, it's well funded. It's all there. So whenever you hear people talk about insurance companies or insurance things, this is a risk pool that you belong to, and it's slightly different legalese, but it's still very good coverage. What I want to talk to you about is, kind of what drives your risks in this situation. And really, whenever I talk about, the coverage that the district has, whether it be, Pen 1, 2, Sandy, or MCDD, I'm talking about the participant itself, the legal entity, and also the participants such as employees, volunteers, board members, while in the course and scope of their duties under the direction and control of the district. So you as board members are being board members right now. It's a lawful board meeting, you're present, you're doing your thing. And so you are under the umbrella currently. As soon as the meeting's adjourned and you drive home and you visit your aunt or you visit your cousin or go to the store, you're no longer a board member legally. And so knowing that difference is interesting and often very important legally. There's political reality versus legal reality. That's a whole different conversation to have, but I wanted to say it out loud because people sometimes don't differentiate between the two, okay? So let's talk about your insurance coverage generally. So special districts provides all the basic coverages that you have, and you'll see on page 2 of 85 the breakdown of like MCDD has $10 million of liability insurance, Penn 1, Sandy each have 5, and then Penn 2 has 10. You'll see, those are broken down by those amounts. Now, general liability is like duty owed, breach of duty, and damages, courts brought forth in Oregon courts. Also federal lawsuits and such as well. It could be employment practices, it could be abuse, it could be all different kinds of negligence issues, but those are the types of coverages that general liability cover for you as a district through the special districts program. You also have auto liability as well. It's not a column in there, but it's usually within the liability portion. Auto liability is there, and it equals the amounts of liability that you have so long as you have vehicles. Now, the only district that has vehicles is MCDD, so they have the full $10 million of auto liability coverage as well. The rest of the entities have $500,000 of hired non-owned auto liability, such that if you were driving your personal vehicle to the special districts conference and you got in a wreck, then that $500,000 of auto liability, because you're going there as a board member, doing board member things that you're supposed to do, then that $500,000 would cover you on top of your personal insurance. That's in excess of your personal insurance, right? Because auto insurance travels with the car. This is on top of that. That's just liability, however. There is no coverage for your vehicle, your personal vehicle's losses if you're struck by somebody or somebody hits you, let's say. Any questions about that? Okay, great. Property is something that is very broad coverage. Obviously, as you see in that same slide, $28 million of MCDD property. The rest of the entities are about $1 to $2 million, almost $3 million. Overall, that's just basic coverages with regard to property. There's fire and wind and rain and all the different types of perils happening in that situation. I will tell you, overall, the insurance market is really struggling right now. Property is the single greatest struggle, however, in our entire industry because of inflation, supply chain, which I hate saying supply chain, I'm tired of it, but sorry, it's the truth right now, is these supply chain issues. So values for property and losses for property are up. We're having more storms and issues more often, stronger, and costing more. And when they happen and cause damage, it's harder to get things repaired because of lack of people and lack of products in a timely manner. As I'm sure if any of you have been doing any building in your individual entities, you know that that's a major struggle. So that is got a lot of pressure to it. And because of that, property values are being trended upwards every renewal and also adding rate as well. Any questions about that? So the last one in this slide is talking about the crime coverage. Now, crime coverage is really, it's about the dollars of the district themselves being stolen, by employees, embezzled. There's all different kinds of things, but it's really the district's money being taken, embezzled by employees or volunteers or board members. It's a very broad coverage. It's pretty amazing. However, most of you guys don't do your own dollars. You have the MCDD staff do the books for your districts. So MCDD purchases a separate third-party crime policy where if their employees embezzle your money as Penn 1, Penn 2, Sandy, whatever, that your coverage and their coverage kicks in. Theirs would be primary because their people did the bad deals with their employees embezzling. but that is a newer coverage that the district invested in about 3 years ago, which has been great, 2 or 3 years ago now. But that should help you kind of understand that because they're handling your money, that can be a gap in coverage. And so we've filled that gap with the school district's third-party coverage. Last but not least, in my discussion, I want to talk to you about the best practices. The best practices is a way that the Special Districts Insurance Services Trust is trying to give you incentive to belong to like a association, attend trainings, work on certain policies and procedures. It's brand new and different each year. And there's 5 different functions or 5 different tasks they ask you to do per year. And for each task, it's a 2% credit on your general liability premium. And while for smaller entities, it's not a ton of money, I want you to give a push that, getting all of those done as a board, it shows 2 things. One, you're educating yourself. You're involved, you're understanding what they're trying to get you to do. You're better in the district, but 2, you're saving them money at the same time. And so please don't think that any of these are not worth your time or not worth your very conservative time in these issues. Really have that discussion openly and ask staff to help. We can also help if there's any questions about the why, but attending trainings, being part of associations, like I say, it changes every year in some suspects, but they're fairly easy to get to. And so my goal for each of the districts is to get the full 10%. So you can realize just the savings, but also the training and the reasoning behind it. So that's what I wanted to get across to you guys. You can see where you stack up. Of course, more coverage is available. This is just where we've had discussions internally with staff as to where your risk profiles are and the cost benefit analysis. But if you have any questions, I'd love to hear them.
Eric, you have a question?
Yeah, I do. So last year, Penn 2 was 5 for 5 on the tasks. This year, we were 4 out of 5. So we only had an 8% discount. What did we miss?
I do not have that at my fingertips, but I can.
Okay, so yes. So again, I agree with you. If you could get that back to us, I'd appreciate it. Second question is, this does not speak to D&O insurance, does it?
Yes, it does. Actually, thank you for asking that question. So the way that special districts have their policy, it's called a manuscript policy. They write it completely themselves. It's not ISO based. So it's built in a different way, meaning that the named participant is the district. The participant is anybody, employees, board members, volunteers, like I spoke about before. So if you qualify as that, directors are one, remember I said board of directors. If you have a bad act alleged against you, then that umbrella is above you as if it was a D&O policy. It doesn't call it D&O. It covers you with that same $5 or $10 million liability umbrella as if it was a separate D&O policy. They simply build it into the general liability coverage.
Jeff,
Okay,
can
great.
you disclose the acronym DO?
Directors and officers.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Right. It's so often what happens is that you really want to be able to ensure that somebody coming onto the board, if they ask a question, are we insured? If somebody sues us, then the answer is yes, and that the legal expenses are going to be picked up by the insurance company. Final question really relates to your additional coverages. And here I just want to make certain that I understand clearly what this means. So for example, for Penn 2, our debris removal is a sublimit of $5 million or 25% of the loss, whichever is less. So if we had a $5 million claim for debris removal, in point of fact, all we could do is claim 25% of that, and 75% would be on the district, correct?
So, Eric, which entity are you discussing? Are you talking about,
Penn
Eric?
2.
Penn 2. So Penn 2 has a property limits maximum coverage of $2.294 million. So that is the total insured values of all the items totaled together. So it would be pumps or buildings or whatever it is, 2.294857 is what the current total insured values is. That is the maximum that any property loss will be reimbursed from special districts to Pin 2, starting there. Okay.
So in the event of a flood and we've got $5 million worth of debris removal, that would be on the district, correct? We would have to pay that.
Yeah. So debris removal in this context is, let's say that you have a building that is insured for $1 million, and that building is half destroyed. And then you need to get in there and rip out and pull out the destroyed portion of the building and remove that debris. So it's a insured building damaged. That's the removal of the debris we're talking about. It's not just like you have one of your canals plugged up and you want to remove those trees from that. That is not insured by this. This is damage to covered buildings, pumps, that kind of stuff that covers.
Right. And so really, when we look at this, we've got basically $3 million or so of insurance, and that's based upon our net book value of all assets, not replacement value.
The items on the schedule are appraised by a third-party company called CBIZ every 5 years. Those buildings that are over $100,000 are appraised by that on a replacement cost value basis.
Okay.
Those under $100,000 are not appraised, and that's up to staff to provide numbers that are reasonable in their minds. In that case, the great part about this coverage, however, is it's a blanket limit. In other words, you get to apply this entire $2.294 million to any one occurrence. So if you have, let's say, a small shed that's on the books for $400,000 with stuff in it, but it actually costs you $1.4 million to actually replace it, repair it, whatever it is, you get to apply up to $2.294 million on any one occurrence. That's the blanket. So the individual numbers don't mean as much. They do, but not as much, because there's no single limit for every single item on the property schedule. We're in the weeds, but it's a great question.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're so welcome.
I have Wendy up next and then Tammy.
I was going to answer Eric's question about last year's SDIS best practices program. So the one thing that Pen 2 chose not to do was to do a 2-hour board evaluation process with a third-party assessor, and it was with a contractor from SDAO, and it was right in September when you all were having a lot of meetings, and the board chairs decided that we had asked enough of your time, I believe, but that question did go out to the board chairs to see whether you wanted to do that. And then the other opportunity that some of the boards didn't take us up on was the online trainings. So there was a board university, and it's a series of classes put on by SDAO.
Thank you, Wendy.
Mr. Stephenson.
Hey, good afternoon, Jeff. I just had a question regarding SDIC, and I know this is down into the weeds a little bit, but the hired auto physical damage, that we talked about being like board member driving somewhere as an example, that coverage is more than our general liability coverage. Why would it be so high?
Your general liability coverage for, are you talking for the JCA or for the urban water quality?
SDIC.
So you have $5 million of coverage for liability, for general liability. You only have $500,000 for hired non-owned auto liability.
Right. So I guess my question then is, why would the premium be more for that piece than it would for the general liability piece?
The hired non-owned premium, I don't have that broken down in front of me.
For us is 4,400 and the general liability is 4,000.
That does not seem right to me.
Okay.
I don't know if I've got that.
Yes,
Let
we
me
could follow up.
Yeah, let's follow up with that.
Great.
So
Thank you.
you're asking for, okay, so that the breakdown of different coverages. I think there may be a number missed, but I'll get back to you on that. Thank you,
Great.
Tammy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jeff, quick question. The property limits, they seem for SDIC at 2.58 million, you know, we could not replace our pump station for that. Is that help me understand why you wouldn't have it at least what your replacement value would be?
Well, you guys, this is what a independent appraiser came in and provided those numbers in totality for all the items on the actual schedule. If you believe that that is low, we can add whatever value to existing or even new items. If you're like, Jeff, we said we can't do that. We need to go to 5 million to bring up that total insured value number to $5 million. That is more than okay to do. Smaller districts have that risk where one item might be worth a ton of money. Therefore, it can cause a concern about this may not replace everything if it happens, or if this one item is damaged. For an organization like MCDD, where they've got multiple larger items, they can use those values to shore up one big loss to cover that. And so you don't have that same, I'll just call it good fortune that MCDD does. So if you would like to revisit that and increase any of those values because you're uneasy about it, I'm more than happy to pass that along. Absolutely.
Thanks, Jeff. You know, I'll defer that to Lori and Jim to kind of they're managing that on our behalf. So I just trying to understand the value, because I know we're on a path to replace that pump station, and I wish it was that number, but it's not.
Well, and remember my discussion about the property market being so pressed right now because of the inflation and you're right. Things are, I have some entities that are building buildings right now, especially like schools. It's $750 a square foot right now to build a school. That's just not normal. So thank you for that question, Tom.
We'll definitely follow up and check in with Bill and compare the numbers with the 2 engineering assessments for that pump replacement, and just make sure we true that up, or bring back to you an opportunity to true it up if you choose to.
Yeah, it's just Jeff's going to come back with another quote, right? So that's all it's going to trigger. So what's that? What level of risk are we willing to accept? So Lori, anything further you would like to add to this discussion? And Jeff, thank you so much. We appreciate you coming and talking
Absolutely.
to us.
Great questions. Thank you.
I have nothing more to add. Thank you, Jeff, for walking us through all of this.
Very welcome.
Jeff, you're more than welcome to stick around, but we probably recognize your time is better well spent in other areas.
Thank you all.
Mark Wilcox, he's here to talk about PMLS.
And I'm actually going to start it off here, and then I'll hand it over. Colin Rowan, Director of Planning and Public Affairs for MCDD. And just before Mark and Jamie go into the PMLS update, I just wanted to give a quick update on things happening in Washington, D.C. related to PMLS, as well as some of the funding conversations we had. So in January, I let the boards know that the good news that PMLS, the Portland Metro Levy System Study, was included in the Water Resources Development Act of 22, which is an act of Congress for construction authorization of the project. So that is a major milestone. Shared that previously. Also shared that the PMLS project received the year 1 appropriation for the pre-construction engineering design phase. Mark is going to share a lot more details about that coming up, but I did want to give you an update on the year 2 appropriations, because even before we received year 1 appropriations, we were working on that. So I did want to let you know that we are included, PMLS was included in the president's budget that was released last week. So that is a huge thing and really good news. Previous to that, worked with our partners at the City of Portland, Metro, and the Port of Portland to complete congressionally directed spending requests to our senators. So that it's a fancy word name for earmarks. Since we're included in the president's budget, it means that those congressionally directed spending requests turn into a programmatic request. It's a it's a much better thing to make those requests, and being in the president's budget is more so a great thing. So we'll need to make these annual appropriation requests, but this inclusion in the president's budget is really great news, and we should take a moment to celebrate that. And then we'll give you more updates as the federal budget develops over the rest of this current year. So we'll make those annual appropriation requests. The other big milestone or hurdle that we'll need to do at the end of the pre-construction engineering design phase is make a request for a new start authorization to enter into the construction phase. And so that is basically an increment of funding to basically do the construction work. We're already working with the Corps and with our Oregon delegation to position ourselves to make that request when the time comes. The other thing at the last board meeting that we discussed was how we're paying for our 35% local share. And so all 4 of the legacy, the drainage district boards have funding in your budgets for this first year. And it is based on getting a funding match from Business Oregon. We have those contracts in hand, and we plan to bring those contracts to the boards next month for authorization for signature. And I just want to thank Brian Sheets, Armand Resto Spots, and Hong Nguyen, the attorneys on this call, for their work and conversation about those contracts, and for reaching out to Business Oregon to clarify some of the terms. So just want to note that it's moving forward, and we expect those to be ready for signature soon. And then just the last piece is that there's been a lot of MCDD staff that have been working on this, as well as our partners that have made us basically brought us to this point. So I really want to thank them, and especially Mark Wilcox, who, as the PM for PMLS, has been doing an amazing job moving this project along, making sure that the drainage districts are really well positioned, and that as much is included in this project as possible. And he's been doing an amazing job working with our partners to sort of really get as much out of this process as possible for all parties included. So yeah, thanks, Mark. And I want to hand it over to Jamie.
Mark, Jamie, just before you start, I just want to recognize some additional board members have joined in. I saw Annalise is present, so she would be with Penn One and SDIC. Others, board members that have arrived?
Nikki Schultz, MCDD.
Great, thank you. Mark, Jamie, back to you.
Great, thank you. Well, hello, everybody. It's always good to see you, especially on a very sunny day. I'm going to start off, and then I'm going to hand it over to Mark. We're here to give you an update, as you have seen us here before, talking with you about where we are in the process. And as always, we start with the 18-month timeline of kind of where we are and what's coming up. The red circle is the things that we're talking with you about today. You've already heard a little bit of a funding update from Colin. Mark's going to give you a bit more detail there. And then the bulk of what we're going to talk with you about is the City of Portland IGA and the design agreement. And so we want to chat with you about, remind you about the work that happened, that's been going on. We talked with you, I think, back in January about this process, and that we were going to be coming to you in the spring with a little bit more detail. And in your packet, there's a draft design agreement that Mark's going to just touch on briefly. But it's really it's a heads up that we're at the point where we're just about ready to ask you for some help. And Mark will detail what that looks like. So if you want to go to the next slide, I think, Mark, the next slide might be yours.
Yep. Just gonna make sure. Can everyone hear me? Can no one hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay,
I'll hear you.
great. Just make sure I try to keep it muted when not talking. So welcome back, everyone, for your daily dose of PMLS. This slide should look familiar. We showed it to you in January, kind of touched it up a little bit, and I'm going to give you some snippets. of new information that I've obtained speaking to the Corps as we've started this process. But this sort of timeline with the cash flows hopefully is informative and helpful in understanding when the various money drops happen. And of course, this red block at the top is the most relevant to the legacy districts. You can see we kind of broke it out further in terms of the PED costs and when those money drops are expected to hit. So everything stays on schedule. Like Colin alluded to, and you saw in your board package, the first step is just getting to a design agreement. So the Corps is not, Corps has this very small pot of money outside of the 5.6 million that they're using to put together the design agreement. And then until we get that, they don't have access to the rest. So that's their main objective right now, is to get that agreement in place. When you look at the agreement, you will see that it is, there's some blanks to fill in, but it is a boilerplate or a template. And so there shouldn't be much, that much that needs to be changed or discussed. The Corps will tell us, as we've told you before, that if we make any changes to the boilerplate, it'll really jeopardize our path, our schedule and our pathway to look as competitive as possible in the process. It'll cause a very big delay. So obviously we want to make sure that our needs are met by that agreement. But what's going to be discussed over the next few weeks are things that aren't in that agreement. It'll be things like in-kind services and just some of the details. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. But as far as funding goes, and this table goes, the numbers are relatively static. There will be some adjustment on the back end for cost escalations, but the actual cost of the project and the scope has not obviously changed. We haven't done any work on it. And the first year's expectation for the non-federal sponsors contribution is $2 million and then $1.65 million in year 2. And that will, and that is of course largely underwritten by the Business Oregon grants that we have been awarded. So that's good news. So those numbers are bigger than the actual impact to the district checkbooks. So then the next step will be about 2 years down the line, they will have an increment, a construction increment that's ready to go to bid and build. And they'll give us kind of a thumbs up to start acquiring real estate. That this all occurs around the same time that we sign a project partnering agreement. Again, the goal is for 2 years to have an increment to be able to build, and for that to coincide with congressional funding for construction. And at which point we'll sign a project partner or construction agreement, and the real estate acquisition phase will begin. I think we went over that ad nauseum, so I'm going to try not to go into too much detail, just kind of provide a refresher and opportunity to ask questions. The number there on the right, again, as I reminded you in January, for real estate for the first phase was projected to be about $2 million based on what we think will need to be acquired in Pen 1. But I have some news for you on sequencing and slides moving up. So don't get too wedded to that number. That number is going to change. And of course, that number is going to be funded by hopefully a GEO bond and the new districts as we continue towards transition. Again, shortly after we begin real estate, we'll go into the construction agreement. And then the big money hits, because in a normal process, we would give the Corps a bunch of money at the beginning of each year of construction. But as we understand it, we have such a large share of our non-federal contribution is in relocations and real estate that like cash contribution is very minimal. You can see there, it's like about 1.1 million. And then when we get to those phases that have a large amount of reconstruction, such as Pen 1 and Pen 2, then that larger figure will hit. Not to say there won't be reconstruction in other phases, but just the bulk of it is in Pen 1 and Pen 2, because we're literally ripping up rights of way in order to raise the levee. Whereas other areas we're lucky enough to have bare dirt.
Mark, I don't want to interrupt, but would you please tell us what LERDS stands for? It's so compelling.
Okay, I don't have my cheater, but it's basically lands, environment, restoration, relocations, disposal. So it is basically all the things that the Corps, the reason that the Corps has a non-federal sponsor, those sort of tricky things to make sure that real estate is environmentally clean, and all those relocation things that the non-federal sponsor can do better than the Corps. And then of course, real estate acquisition, because we're gonna need to own those easements or fee title in the end ourselves as we operate and maintain the system. So that's LERDS is all the costs that the Corps always gives to the non-federal sponsor. And again, that's this project has a very high percentage of LERDS compared to a normal project mainly because of the urban nature of it. So then finally, just so I think I added this just so that you can see this, that, 2030. So it's a long project. I'm sure we're not going to stretch that out at all. I'm sure there won't be any delays. It's such a large project. So anyway, I hope this is helpful. We'll continue to show this slide and amend it as helpful. This you've seen many times. You saw it last month. I'm just flashing this before you, the various phases. You can see there's a lot of work in Pen 1 and 2, and I'm just going to talk about the phasing. So in my next slide, but so Pen 1 is sort of expected to be one phase, and then Pen 2 work is supposed to be another phase. That is not including the Pen 2 MCDD cross levy. That's going to be in a different phase. Then again, then the MCDD work, which I kind of cut out the work at Broughton Beach because it's very small. I'm just trying to economize space. But you can see there's work on the cross levee. Down here, there's a pump station upgrade as well. And then the work out in Fairview and Troutdale. I think you're all familiar with this as well. That's another significant chunk. And there's of course, the pump station work in that area. And then the work down in the Troutdale Outlet Mall to deal with one of our recertification projects. So the Corps' goal, I'm going to jump to this third set of bullets. So that the current expected construction sequence was Pen 1, and then an MCDD and SDIC / pump stations phase, and then Pen 2 levee raise. The Corps has actually told us that that was a perspective, and but when we get into really rolling up our sleeves in the design phase, we will figure out what the actual increment will be. And just more information comes to light as you work on this stuff and you understand where constructability or implementation risk exists, or where maybe there's longer lead times. And so their goal is to get us sort of walk before we run and get us going with simpler phases before we tackle the most complex phases. So the Corps will begin PED and focus on the entire project in the big picture and get to everything to sort of 30% as I understand it. And then it will hyper focus on a constructible phase that they can take all the way to plans and specs and bid and build, as I mentioned earlier. And at that point, they hope again to move into construction on the first phase and then start to design the second phase concurrently. And then of course, when the second phase is built, is designed and bid, then they'll start on the third phase of design. And so they'll sort of be staggering everything. And most importantly, it looks like pump stations, all the pump station work, and that isn't just that includes MCDD Pump Station 2, it includes 13th Avenue Pump Station in Pen 2, and it includes Sandy Drainage Improvement Company Pump Station. Those are the big ticket items, but there's other improvements in other pump stations to sort of make those uniformly resilient and redundant in terms of their power systems. So that it was seen, that what I'm hearing over and over again is that is likely to be the core of a first phase. And so Pen 1 work will likely shift, and it's anybody's guess. I suspect that that will shift to the second phase, and possibly if they feel like they can bite off a little bit more, then they'll do the MCDD, SDIC, or Pen 2 cross levy in that first package, because it is a relatively simple levy project. I'm just going to pause really quickly for any clarifying questions. Okay. Either I'm putting you all to sleep or I'm being very precise and informative. So hopefully the latter. So I'm going to talk about the City of Portland Task Force and IGA. And that's going to be one of the two documents that we bring to you as we focus on the design agreement. But I want to preface that with just one point, and I think I've made this before, but obviously the City of Portland, it has such a variety of complex projects and coordination needs and major disturbances, and so to their existing facilities and infrastructure, which don't really exist in the rest of the project. So just reminding those maybe new to the process, like why do they get a task force? Because it's really complicated, and there's a lot of shared resources and infrastructure. But that said, and I'll speak this a little bit more in the beginning, that doesn't mean that we're not coordinating with other municipalities, with the county, metro, port, and the other cities, or that we won't. We do expect to have the same opportunity for coordination during the design process and beyond, to just make sure that nothing is missed during the design, and that we don't have any additional arrangements that might be required to share resources. But the cities, this goes above and beyond due to the footprint of the project. So I think you've seen this slide before. It's important to keep in mind that it's a two-way street. You know, there's certain things that the city needs, and there's certain things that we need. We need some of the financial resources from the city. We need them to accept facilities, you know, in areas like Bridgeton Road and Marine Drive, there's extensive right-of-way facilities that will be disturbed and rebuilt. And we need them to accept them so that the districts aren't saddled with any sort of O&M responsibility. So there's quite a few things that the districts need. And then, of course, again, the city, you know, we're all trying to minimize the disturbance to the public and coordinate so that there's no finger pointing later. They generally see us all as one. And so we need to act in lockstep around some of these projects, particularly where there'll be ongoing construction disturbance for long periods of time. So, and then of course, real estate agreements and other things like that for public lands are important.
Hey, Mark.
Yes.
So I sent you an email. Can you help me understand if SDIC is going to require an IGA with the City of Portland or not?
The IGA is between us, the non-federal sponsor, and whichever district. Between us and the city. I don't see that you don't have overlapping interests with the City of Portland, so I don't expect anything of that sort. If there are any side agreements, then they would be, they would just similarly be between us and SDIC. I mean, we'd have some sort of working arrangement for anything in particular, but given the nature of the projects in SDIC, that is, there's several ways that we're going to address needs and sort of carrot and stick issues in terms of, there's going to be easements required. So the landowners in SDIC, we'll be able to make sure some of their needs are met just through the enforcement or the acquisition of easements and things like that. Is there anything that you anticipate that you have particular concern about, like coordination on?
No, it was just reading your staff report. It wasn't clear. I mean, I could see SDIC benefiting from the City of Portland's large staff in real estate negotiation easements, because I think that's a strength that MCDD still needs to develop. But I don't know how the project's being managed. It was just more like, we don't have City of Portland and the SCIC boundaries. So it's just more of just clarification.
Yeah, well, we have been more proactive and less I mean, most of our coordination outside of the city has started with the LRC task, the technical advisory subcommittee. And so that's where we built a bunch of relationships. So we have ongoing relationships with Multnomah County and Fairview and others. And, you know, we're going to cover down on any gaps and create opportunities for bringing up those concerns first at a sort of design objectives level. And then, of course, once we start seeing plans from a design review standpoint. But yeah, we can certainly create some opportunities to engage and make sure that there's nothing that will require any additional agreements.
And Mark, I know you'll be drawn upon Hong and her legal team, as well as Brian, to support any sort of easements or condemnation that may pursue.
Roger that. No. Thanks, Tom. I'm gonna move through some of the next few slides quickly. Again, these are again things that we've talked about previously, and I think they go with kind of without saying. You know, we're just dealing with some of the various environmental issues and some of the coordination with the right-of-way relocations and stuff. So all of these things will basically be mapped over, and we're trying to distill out like what is going to be in this IGA, and then there will be likely either an amendment to this IGA or a separate IGA once we enter into the project partner agreement and construction, so that we capture anything that has come up during the design phase that impacts construction. So this IGA is going to be relatively light, we think, because it's not going to be covering you know, any agreements for construction costs and coordination. Sorry, get my clicker to go. Again, I spoke to most of these things, talking about coordination and for the best impact on the or the least impact to the public, dealing with any regulatory gaps, dealing with integration of public agencies, just capturing design process. And as we get closer to the design, when we talk about the design agreement, we can talk about, we'll talk a little bit more because we'll have more information from the Corps on how they typically hand over designs for local agency review. So again, because we don't have the scope of impacts in the other cities as we do in the city of Portland, that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be some, you know, utility relocations or public facilities that aren't impacted. Just it's on a dramatically smaller scale that we think can be handled through normal processes. Okay, so I'm going to be wrapping up here because again, the goal is just to get you warmed up and get you ready to be seeing an agreement. You'll at liberty to read the existing agreement and study it and bring any, you know, be teed up for when we actually give you the design agreement and the IGA. And so again, stressing that first we need to get the design agreement going before we can do any design or really get rolling on any of the details. So the Corps is really pushing hard on that. You know, we're talking about building in some in-kind services into the design agreement to make sure that we can, any services we provide are reimbursed, or anything that our partners provide is reimbursed during design. And then of course, later on during construction, that's going to be even more critical and expensive. So we're trying to make sure that we slow the Corps' roll long enough to clearly review this and coordinate. You'll be seeing resolutions that give Jim the authority to sign on your behalf. Yeah, our goal is
time for a question. I see Hong's hands up.
Yes, Hong.
Just really a comment to give you all this format group and the JCA. I believe some of them are still here. The fact that there will be many, many resolutions coming to memorialize this very complicated step of the cost allocation the Business Oregon grant, as well as the design agreement and the IGA with the city of Portland. So there will be a barrage of resolutions and attachments with attachments of the IGA and the agreements themselves for you to be reviewing in the coming months. Thanks.
Thanks, Hong. Eric?
Eric, we can't hear you, unfortunately.
Trying to cut down on bandwidth, and that doesn't help, does it? Mark, you're our point person with the negotiations of the IGA. Who is in charge of this for the city of Portland? That's coordinating all the activities from the various departments.
It's a good question, Eric. Rochelle Altman is with the city's Bureau of Environmental Services strategy group. She's coordinating on the city's behalf, and I'll just send her kudos because she's been doing a great job of herding the cats, if you will, like the various city agencies. There's just a lot of players, and she's really helped us streamline, provide one point of contact, and of course we have a lot of sidebar conversations. But that's who's coordinating on behalf of the city.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and it's great that they've dedicated that resource. So that's all come out of the city's supplemental appropriations or special appropriations. So they're putting a lot of time into it, taking a lot of time out of Hyde presently. So yeah, so aside from all the resolutions, is very succinctly, it's going to be sort of we're going to have a design agreement, we're going to have an IGA, we're going to try to mesh those as we have the background. Again, the design agreement's fairly straightforward. It is what you will see, but there's going to be just discussions about scope and cost of in-kind services and maybe other details that we'll be talking about before we're willing to sign the design agreement. We'll be making you aware of any of those considerations, and then concurrently the IGA is going to have to be pushed forward and adapting to the results of those discussions and coordination. So we expect those to sort of be concurrent, and then the design agreement will be in final draft form for signature about just prior to you receiving it, so that you know exactly what's in the design agreement before you're asked to sign an IGA that relates to it. So I think that's all I have to provide you. Next month we'll have hopefully a lot more detail to provide, and hopefully more information from the Corps about how the design process moves forward. But the discussions we've had so far have been very good. We've started to sort of open the closet door and shed the light onto a lot of questions that we've had for the last 2 years while the Corps has effectively been on ice and only had a small bandwidth to, and staff time funded to be able to answer our questions.
Thank you, Mark. Just to make sure, no final questions directed at Mark at this time? Great. Thanks again, Mark.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Moving on to item E, the environmental program update. Carrie, you with us? Oh, we got a presentation.
Yes, I am with you. Hi, thanks everyone. Carrie Sanneman, I'm the environmental program manager, and I also lead our planning department. And it's been actually almost 2 years since I provided a briefing to these boards on the environmental and natural resources work of the drainage district. So it felt like a good time to check back in. I know there's a number of folks that are new to the boards, and also that's long enough that probably worthy of a refresher for anyone. So I'll start with an overview of program, and then what some of the core work areas or services are that align between flood safety, delivery, and environmental work. Some of the accomplishments from the last 2 years, but mostly focusing on last year, and some of the things that are coming up. Now, throughout, this is a bit of a fruit salad of different districts and district combinations. So I've done my best to note on each piece where the specific work is happening. Happy to answer questions about that afterwards though, as well, so that you understand exactly what's happening in your district. But I felt like doing it this way gave you the flavor of the whole program and the nature of work that we're doing. So we have an environmental program because it is good business. The districts operate in waterways that are state and federal jurisdiction, as well as being in a number of municipalities in the county. There's a pretty thick set of regulatory programs just to do our operations and maintenance and to do improvement projects. And so having expertise in-house, having long-term and good relationships with the folks that we're working with at those other places is very helpful. And so it's just intentional and strategic to have some expertise around natural resources when your job is moving water. It's also an organizational value of MCDD to consider our impact on the environment. And we do very few things fully alone, right? Besides the coordination between the multiple districts, all the cities, nonprofits, regulatory agencies, it's important to a lot of people that we work with as well, and to our community. And the last reason, which I guess this is supportive of the work to transition to the new district. ORS 550 asks the Urban Flood Safety and Water Quality District to contribute to improved water quality, fish and wildlife habitat, floodplain restoration, and landscape resilience in the way that it delivers flood safety projects. And so our work is able to bridge between the environmental work of the drainage district boards and the planning for the new district. In your packet, this was a list of 5, and now it's a list of 4. I'm going to walk through each of these. There's really a lot of overlap in the way that it's organized, and I think that's a good thing, but you'll see that sometimes there's work that's about permitting and regulatory coordination that also supports strong relationships with environmental partners and so forth. Again, that feels like a good thing to me, but I'm going to walk through each of these and talk about why we do this, what it is, and some highlights of recent activity and upcoming activity. Starting with, I think of it as eating your vegetables. Permitting and regulatory coordination is not necessarily fun, but it's really necessary and helpful for our organization. So this is staying in compliance with the law. And it's having good relationships with regulatory agencies. It's our practice to focus on having good relationships. You know, certainly we are, I and Amber Ayers and others in consultation with legal counsel, if there's chances or opportunities where we need to push back. But generally speaking, the strategy is that we move at the pace of trust, and we have to do a lot of permitting. The more trust, the better relationships we have, the better communication and outcomes we get for permitting our work. This section probably has the least exciting photos, but I'll note that we have a whole lot of reporting that we do every year, state, federal, city of Fairview, city of Portland, that is, since my time here, we have an excellent record of being all complete and on time. We're also about to get a new programmatic permit for work in federal waterways below the ordinary high water mark. So that's that map on the right. We have comparable maps for all of the districts, and the programmatic permits give us an umbrella for a number of different activities in the range of places we might need to do them. So they're really important to keep our operations and maintenance work on track and not need to wait for individual permit renewals. These are things like regrading a bank or replacing a culvert or working on a boat ramp, repairing or replacing a flood control structure. So pretty central and important things to be able to do fairly quickly and with predictable permitting requirements. And then another one I'll highlight, which was done in partnership with BES and other bureaus of the city, is there's now a new code standard that expedites the review of minor improvements. So things like our ditch safety program, where we're adding a small concrete pad or we're adding small areas to our existing assets, we have a really predictable and expedited pathway through land use review for that. So that's another win for the advocacy work that happens by the agency and in collaboration with our partners. Really soon, by the end of this fiscal year, I expect we'll have a Mercury TMDL implementation plan, and that we'll have closed out the consent order for the Bridgeton Road levee repair to the satisfaction of all parties. This is a good time to pause and say, I'm trying to cover a lot of stuff, so I'm just going to kind of fly through it, but please ask questions. I tried a version of this presentation where I explained all of these bullets, and it was longer than you wanted it to be. So feel free to write down things that you want to hear more about, and I'll tell you about them at the end. Coming up next year, I've got this little diagram on the side to show where the ordinary high water mark is. And I mentioned the programmatic permit for the Army Corps. Well, we have sort of a sister permit for Department of State Lands that we have to start renewing. And there's quite a bit of groundwork to do in getting that done. So that'll be a pretty big effort next year. And then within the city of Portland districts, the city is revising its E-zone maps, so conservation and protection zones. And so we'll be in conversation with them and collaboration with other folks to understand and navigate potential impacts to our work. Second set of activities or services called evaluating environmental strategies. These are the places where natural resource management is flood safety, flood risk reduction, and where we're using natural resource management to achieve our objectives. And one of the best examples is in Pen 2 and MCDD, there's been a number of years of work to treat aquatic invasive weeds. So they get really thick, they keep water from moving through, and by treating them, we save work and we save wear and tear on the pumps. And it's been really successful. Some findings from last year's report, we see about an 80% reduction in the Pen 2 ditch system. Some of the ditches had, that includes one ditch that had one plant that was removed. So really great progress in treating aquatic weeds and keeping them moving. This is done in partnership with BES. So, this is a really good example of a place where activities to support flood safety are also activities that are supporting ecological health of the system. And here's a picture to kind of give you a sense of what that sort of change looks like when you have a lot of invasive aquatic macrophytes just really aggressively taking over the waterway versus when past the treatment that we've been doing. Another fun example, this is in MCDD, is that we're piloting a pollinator seed mix on the levees. Amber Ayers is leading this work. On the far left, you see the seeds themselves, which were donated by BES, which we very much appreciate. Next photo over is Charles or Chuck on the hydroseeder, and then Amber got her chance to run the hydroseeder and had a great time. And over on the right-hand side, you see our test plots. So we're identifying if the maintenance and erosion control features of this seed mix is sufficient for our needs, because we periodically resurface, reseed sections of the levees, and we have the opportunity to potentially provide more habitat for bees and birds and other pollinators at the same time if it's successful. Another one some of you will be familiar with, but I thought I'd reference it for the new folks. Beaver are incredibly important ecologically and also require a lot of management because they like to stop water and we like to keep it moving. So it is part of our operations crew specialty to live with beavers wherever they can and manage their impacts and keep water moving through structures like the beaver deceiver on the left. We've also been working for a number of years to find opportunities where we really can't manage them on site without a lot of additional cost and effort to relocate a limited number of animals. That happened in 2021. You see zoo staff in the middle. We got our beavers got beavers from the SDIC Troutdale Travel Center area, got world-class healthcare at the zoo, and then were relocated to a really beautiful area in the Cascades. So that's ongoing. And again, an example of where we can have a positive environmental impact in our region while supporting our flood safety services. This one's pretty much a catch-all, providing an environmental resource for boards and staff. Happy to provide requests or respond to requests from operations, engineering, and other folks. But I think I just wanted to emphasize that one of the things I have spent a fair amount of time on is supporting the new district in developing the operating revenue and bond scenarios in order to work with, say, legal and operations and engineering on what it looks like to deliver our services with more environmental benefits integrated, or what those opportunities are that make sense for us and what that's going to cost. Another fun thing we got to do last fall, we did a field trip, all staff field trip out to the Staggerwald Wildlife Refuge that's in Camas or near Camas. And it's an example of a levee setback, levee design that has environmental features, additional flood storage, and we were able to partner or learn from Lower Columbia Estuary Partnership, as well as the engineer and permitting firms that did that work. So a lot of good connections made and education for our staff on best practices. And then this is the last category: develop and maintain strong relationships with our natural resource partners. I'm calling that a big tent. That's agencies, that's nonprofits. It's a whole lot of folks. This one might have flown under the radar. It's from 2021. We interviewed over 20 organizations that work and care about the slough and synthesized this report that you see the cover of their shared goals and opportunities to work together. It's something that I reference pretty frequently when we're thinking about, what do we know? What have we heard from our community so far about their priorities? So this was funded in FY20 and 21. We do a lot of participation on various collaborative boards, and I just want to note that half the stuff I've mentioned so far could have fallen in this category, because our treatment of aquatic weeds in the levee pilot is in partnership with BES, as well as one other that the beaver work has a big long alphabet soup of wonderful partners that are involved as well. So we're doing a lot of these things with other people, leveraging their expertise and resources, and trying to bring the best opportunities to the district. My last slide, we recently did a campus planting day. So the Watershed Council has been our lead contracting partner for some revegetation on the campus streamside area. They've been brought in Wisdom of the Elders, which is a nonprofit that uses Indigenous traditional ecological knowledge. Wisdom of the Elders has been leading and doing an amazing job on the site management, and a number of our folks got to go out and do the quick and flashy fun part of putting the plants in the ground. So that happened just a few weeks ago, and hopefully next time you're on campus, they'll start to come to life and beautify and provide water quality benefits and habitat benefits around our campus area. That's the end of what I've got for you. Happy to answer questions and appreciate your time.
Questions for Carrie? Carrie, again, very thorough, and the depth of the program is clearly reaching into many other organizations, and thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Kathy?
Thanks, Carrie. That was great. A really nice update. I'm curious if there is going to, maybe there's a question for fellow board members, if there is a logical point in time to get a deeper dive into discussion of the environmental facets of the new board. You mentioned that in one of your slides, and it would just be interested to hear how that is going. I imagine it might be later than sooner that there'd be something to justify a presentation, but be curious if that would be welcome at format or if it would be something specific to Pin 2. So I think a question to fellow board as well as you, Carrie.
And I'll just say that, of course, I would be happy to. We've done a number of presentations on environmental strategies that we anticipate or are including in the operational budget forecasts or bond forecasts to the Urban Flood Safety and Water Quality District Board. So happy to provide that at the board's discretion.
Thank you.
Other questions for Carrie today?
All right, thanks everybody. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Carrie. Moving on to item F, Flood Safety Columbia River Overview with Astor. Welcome. Astor, your connection is not working on my computer.
You might turn off your video.
Me, everybody.
After, we're still not able to hear you. If you want to email me slides, I can definitely share those.
Curse the internet. Sorry, everyone.
And if this is a long delay, we could definitely switch the agenda around a little bit. I see that as Bill is with us. Oh.
I think maybe we should.
I'm the public affairs and community relations specialist with the
Astor, it's really not quality enough for us to be able to hear you effectively. So I think we're going to need to make a change. Mr. Chair, perhaps we should go. Well, this is the last thing for all of you. Let's give it one more minute maybe and see if we can get this remedied. Otherwise, I think maybe we should reschedule it, but I'm open-minded to the direction of the board. Regrets for the trouble, y'all.
Let's give it a minute. Did she sign in with her cell phone?
They're going to try and sign in with their phone.
And if somebody else could run the slides, that should work.
If Bill, are you on the meeting?
I am.
Are you prepared to do SCADA now, or?
I can do the SCADA system if needed. Only MCD and Pen 2 need to approve it, but it affects all 4 districts.
That would be my suggestion while we see if we can get the presentation going.
That sounds great, Wendy. So let's go ahead and stop on item F, the Flood Safety Columbia River Overview, and allow Pen 1 or MCDD and Pen 2 to hear this SCADA briefing. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay. Thank you, and good afternoon all. Bill Owen, Chief Engineer of the district. I've added one agenda item to your meeting today, and it deals with a contract for on-call SCADA system services. There's a one-page summary of that information. It's on page 50 of 85, at least in the MCD packet. Maybe close to the other ones. It includes that overview, and then it also includes the sample contract that we use as a template, and we just fill in with some details with dates and scopes of work and things of that nature. But the rest of the language is boilerplate, and we would keep that language. So my intention here today is to present this information for your consideration with the possibility of approving and authorizing the ED or the designee to negotiate and sign the contract with the selected contractor. As many of you know, the SCADA system is the core of our communication program that allows us to operate the pump stations remotely, as well as collect information from pump stations and along the Columbia Slough in terms of their water levels. So it's integral and essential for the success of our operations. What we have done is we don't necessarily have, we're a small enough agency that we don't have a SCADA specialist on staff. And so we contract that out to other people. And we have done so in past on 5-year increments. And so the current contract is set to expire. And so we went through a formal procurement process to identify potential firms and step through the protocol that the state of Oregon requires for public contracts of this size. We received 2 solicitations or proposals as a result of our outreach. Wish that there was a little bit more, but it turns out that one of the 2 in particular seems to be a great fit for us, and it's a woman-owned firm, and they are thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion concepts in a fairly traditional engineering field. So I was happy to see that their responses to those in that manner. As well as they're a solid technical organization. So we have not worked with Coldbright Engineering before, but we had a chance to meet with them through an interview process, and both operations and engineering staff feel comfortable awarding the contract to this organization. So as you can see in the summary report, that the amounts of money that we're asking for as the ceiling for each contract differs. It's based on a couple of factors. One is honestly just the number of sites that the SCADA system touches throughout the 4 districts. There are 15 sites total. So each of the 4 districts has different amounts of points. So in SDIC and in Pen 1, there's only 1 location where the SCADA collects information. In Pen 2, there are 2. And so the remaining 11 are in MCDD. So the maintenance side of the work and a little more is based upon that split between the 4 districts. In addition, there are some project-related work that's associated with sites in all 4 districts, and so those project costs are distributed accordingly to the number of sites that the project affects. So, I hope that provides you enough information. I guess what I know, we are required to get approval from the boards for any contract that exceeds $100,000, and that's why MCDD and Pen 2 were initially placed on here. So that's the background. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Bill, are you asking for approval? A motion for approval?
Yeah, sorry, I'm asking for approval from the MCDD and Pen 2 boards because their amounts are over 100,000. SDIC and Pen 1's levels are under 100,000. They were like 78,000 for 5 years or so.
Val, can I give it to you to have Pen 2 take an action?
Yes, I do have a question. Are the 2 sites in Pen 2 at the pump stations?
They are, in this case, they happen to be there. And they're attached to the pump station intake walls, so if we're out on a tour someday and you're interested in it, we can point to some of the equipment associated with the levels that read the equipment that reads the water level, and then inside each pump station there's some hardware that allows us to translate digital information through the radio frequency for the pump station to act. Hope that answers your question.
Eric, Eric first, and then follow with Kathy for questions for Bill.
Okay, thank you. So Bill, thank you so much for answering those detailed questions for me. I think that it's really important for you to make the point that this is helping to future-proof our system. It's really getting it to the point that as we move to more variable speed pumps, you'll have the capability of monitoring that and really being able to tune the loop a little bit in the way that we manage it. I think this is an incredibly important investment for us to make, because in the long run, it's really just going to extend the life of our pumps and really keep us to the level that we're applying the resources in the most effective way. I particularly appreciate the fact that you're upgrading the weather stations, because as we saw in that December event, it rained more in the western part of the district than in the eastern part. And if you were just trying to manage it as a single, an average of 2 inches of rain, we would have had problems in Penn 2. So I really strongly support this. I'm glad that you've been able to identify a highly competent group to be able to service us. And I recognize that this is it's on call up to this amount, and in all likelihood, we won't spend it all, but whenever we spend money on a SCADA system, it's generally money well spent.
Appreciate those thoughts, Eric. And one thing I guess I'll add to your comments about the value of this program or this contract and our SCADA integrators, that we're going to be able to spend a little bit more time on cybersecurity for our pump stations that we haven't had a chance to really in past. And this particular firm seems to have a little more specialty in that than the existing contractor. So I'm looking forward to that as well. Kathy?
Yeah, this sounds great. I always wonder if when you're transitioning between vendors, if there's some costs that might be incurred, whether that's learning curve, relationship building, or transition to new technology. And so I'm just curious how that factored into the decision, if it was even necessary to.
Yeah, I get the sense you've lived through this, a version of this before. Your instinct is right. There is a learning curve for a new contractor. Unfortunately, the current contractor opted not to submit a proposal for reasons I can talk about with folks individually, but what the good news is that in the last couple of years in particular, we spent a lot of time on documentation, and so that's beefed up significantly. And so that transition point, I hope, period, while it will be bumpy a little bit, it's just the nature of it. I think we put ourselves in the best position we can, and we're on very good terms with the existing contractor. And so if we have to, we probably can create a very short contract with them to help provide knowledge transfer during that transition period. So yeah, but your point's well taken. It's definitely something we will live with over the next several months.
Great, thank you.
Bill, we also have a question from Corky.
Correct.
Yeah, at the risk of displaying my ignorance, in the past, we've kicked around a few different questions and ideas about going to a cloud-based system, for example, where we're housing the servers. I mean, we've had several discussions along these lines. I assume that you've considered where we want, what we want for an ultimate system, and making sure that this step doesn't take us down the wrong path.
Yeah,
We want to make sure it doesn't preclude another improvement we might want to do in the future.
yeah, those are good points. The big step for us was transitioning back to radio frequency communication that these boards approved a couple of years ago from cellular. So that was a huge step. But when it comes to cybersecurity and just resiliency of our and redundancy, I guess, for that matter, of our SCADA system, going to a cloud-based system is something that I'd like to explore a little bit more. It's not currently included in the totals ceilings that budget ceilings that are in your packet today, in part because we just haven't had a chance to really explore that very well with the new consultants. So it's something I'd like to explore, and if the result is a contract that will increase the ceilings substantially, I'll definitely circle back with these boards to make sure you all feel comfortable with that approach.
And my concern here is not so much to explore that possibility, although you might want to do that. But my real concern is making sure that we don't take a step that precludes exploring it in the future.
Yeah, good point. And frankly, our the sort of the mothership of the where all the SCADA lives is in the admin building right now. Not the best place for the SCADA system and for a flooding situation. So I'd like to see something in that in a different location besides my house. Yeah, so whether it lives on the cloud or somewhere else, that is certainly on my mind. So, but this contract will not preclude us from exploring that.
Yeah, it's sort of like what you noticed with Kathy is, been there, done that, guilty of it, don't want to do that again. So,
yeah.
So I'm gonna ask Val to have this considered for a motion with his Pen 2 board. So,
Val, I move to approve and authorize the executive director or their designee to negotiate and sign a contract for the on-call supervisory control and data acquisition SCADA system services with a maximum contract value of $144,000 for Pen 2.
Thank you, Eric. Do I have a second?
I second.
Was that Kathy that seconded?
Yep.
I saw Karen raise her hand, but I heard, okay, thank you.
That was me,
Karen
Kathy.
just seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, let's take a roll call vote. Kathy?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Val Humble votes aye. The resolution is passed.
And I'm going to turn it over to MCDD to consider this motion.
All right, do I have a motion? It's on page 50 of the agenda.
I got it. This is Darian. I move to approve and authorize the executive director or their designee to negotiate and sign a contract for the on-call supervisory control and data acquisition SCADA system services with a maximum contract value for MCDD of $468,000.
All right, thanks, Darian. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, any further discussions, questions? All right, hearing none, I will do a roll call vote. Corky?
Aye.
Darian?
Aye.
And Kenzie?
Aye.
And Ken Anderton votes aye. Motion passes
And Nikki
unanimously.
did join us, so.
Oh, okay, Nikki, how do you vote? Sorry,
Aye.
Nikki. And Nikki votes aye, so we have even more unanimous. Motion passes.
Thank you, boards.
Thank you all.
Wendy, we're going to try Aster again. Do we have a audio?
I think because of the time, Tom, we're going to reschedule that presentation.
That sounds great. I do recognize everybody has a calendar to be watching. So let's see, James, do you want to dismiss the Penn one?
James had to leave.
So are they even in quorum anymore?
Is PJ, I don't,
Yeah, Claudio departed too.
Yep. So let's move to Val.
I believe that Penn 2 is going to stay in session for a breakout.
Okay. Then let's see, MCDD is that staying in, so it's just SDIC needs to adjourn as well. SDIC board is adjourned today. So thank you all.
thank you, Tom.
Bye.
Thanks,
And
everybody.
just want to ask who's on the phone. So we're going to try a little fancy maneuver. Thank you for your patience. What we're going to do is ask MCDD to go into executive session. Then I'm going to send them into a breakout room. And then Penn 2 will stay in the main room and continue their meeting. So can I have your language for you, if that sounds acceptable to everybody? It's a never before been done.
Sounds good. Sorry, I was toggling between screens here. Can get to
Yeah,
my
here I'm
mute
just
then.
putting the executive session language in the chat.
All righty. And are you ready? MCDD board will convene an executive session under ORS 192.6602I and 192.6608 to evaluate the performance of an employee. And now if we could get the transfer us over to the breakout room and shut the recording off.
Thank you, MCDD board.
Thank you, Jim.
It'll just take me a second, so. And cookie. Oops. One more. Okay, so MCD members, you should be seeing an invitation to join a breakout room.
Corky, have you seen the invite?
It looks a little frozen.
Yeah, maybe there he goes.
Great. Maybe that worked.
Clever. Thank you, Wendy.
We'll see.
Well,
Val, it's all
The
yours.
reason I asked, thank you. The reason I asked to have a discussion with the group here is that at the turn of the year, I was diagnosed with a cancer of the ureter, which is not a particularly friendly tumor. It's the sort of thing that they treat, they don't expect to cure. So they keep it at bay with chemotherapy, but it does reorient one's priorities, shall we say. So I'd like to step down as president of the board. I can stay on as the board for a while until we've got a candidate that would like to replace, or if you'd like to replace me with someone and you have a good candidate, I'd be glad to resign and give that position to some new person. But I will stay available on the board until we have such a person. But I would like to get someone to step up to be president instead of myself. Is there a member of the board who would be interested in that?
Val, yes, I would. I would be honored to serve as your replacement and to do my very best to carry forward your calm demeanor and the kinds of trying discussions that will be coming up for Penn 2. I really admire what you've done and would be happy to serve in that role.
Thank you, Eric. Is there anyone else who is anxious to ascend to these heights? Is there any reason to delay actually taking a vote on it? Mary Helen's not here, but everyone else is.
Val,
Um,
Val.
Yes, Karen or Kathy?
I just want to say, wasn't aware of this, and I just want to say thank you so much for your service to the board and to the community, and I'm wishing you all the best in your health journeys moving forward here. I've got my fingers and toes crossed for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and as for transition to board chair, I'm guessing that someone has had a conversation with Mary Helen. Is she privy to this?
I haven't, she's aware of my health situation, but I don't believe I've had a private conversation about resigning as president.
Uh-huh. I do feel because we're a small group, it would be nice to have that shared understanding among the board about what's happening before we take it to a vote. But I also don't know Mary Helen's situation, if we are even expecting her to be back in time for the next board meeting, or if that's going to be a long recovery for her.
Do you have any such information, Jim? You said there was a possibility she might even join today remotely, right?
I know, I think her intention is to stay involved, at least via the email I've seen. And I want to stress that this is a board business matter and staff is here to support you, but we're not going to be proactive unless we receive direction from the board, but we can help you in any way that facilitates board decision-making on this. So I'm grateful to all of you for your service and your willingness to keep at it. Thank you all so much.
Well, I could email Mary Helen. I guess I should not copy the rest of you on this because we got to avoid this meetings outside of meetings. Shall we then hold a vote on our next meeting as to whether or not we're going to elect Eric, and I will resign if that's the case? Is that agreeable to everyone? I don't suppose we need an official action if that's what we're going to do.
Well, I do want to check in, Val. I mean, how are you feeling? Do you want to hang in there for another month if you'd like to step?
The side effects are minimal. I'm feeling fine pretty much, but it does change your priorities.
Yes, yes. Well, I don't want you to feel obligated. And I don't think we have another person who is ready to jump in. And I'm confident in Eric's ability to lead. So I don't want to hold this up for, reasons that are unnecessary. And I think it's important that you have peace of mind and you're able to attend to what is important in your life right now.
I don't think it'll be any imposition to me to put this off for a month. Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for your consideration and your concerns. And
so Val, it sounds like you'll reach out to Supervisor Kincaid. And honestly, if you would desire to schedule a special meeting or something, just let us know and we'll work to try and support you, Val, in making the changes you'd like to make. So do let us know if you need additional support. Okay, we'll follow up.
I'll do that. I don't anticipate that. Like I say, the symptoms are minimal. If I hadn't had urine, blood in my urine last December, I'd have no idea that I have this. And the side effects of the treatment are relatively minimal. So I'm doing okay, but yeah, my mind is elsewhere. Okay, much of the time. Okay, N2 is now adjourned.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you
all.
everyone. Appreciate it.